Thank you so much for joining us today. This is our webinar Wednesday, and today's topic is MS, Travel and Leisure. Tonight, we're going to talk about tools and tips for traveling with MS. This webinar series is brought to you by Can Do MS. My name is Kate Togneri, and I will be your moderator this evening. I would like to thank our generous sponsors for supporting this year's webinar series. Thank you very much. I just want to point out some Zoom features that you can use today during this program. So please use the Q&A feature for questions that you have. We'll save time at the end of this webinar for questions. You can use the chat feature if you have any comments that you'd like to share during the webinar or with each other. And if you feel distracted by either of these, the Q&A or the chat, then just feel free to keep them closed and ignore them so that you can focus on all the good content. Additionally, there are closed captions that's available through the show captions box. And lastly, this presentation is being recorded and will be archived on the Can Do MS website. You can download a copy of the presentation slides from the link that we will be dropping in the chat box. And all the links from this presentation are available and clickable in these slides. So make sure you download those. Now I'm happy to introduce our panel, starting with Brittany Kiroz. I'm sorry, Brittany.
It's okay. You just did it in a hot MS fashion. Kiros.
Exactly. Fix that for me. Can you say your last name?
Brittany Kiros, better known to the MS and disability communities as a hot MS. Hi, everyone.
Thank you. I practiced that, but I fumbled it too. So Brittany is a multiple sclerosis advocate, speaker, recording artist, and content creator, and continues her brand, building her brand of a hot MS. And she's in the multiple sclerosis community, and she's here to empower, educate, and encourage others living with MS. Occupational therapist Stephanie Nolan is back with lots of tips for traveling with MS. Stephanie is a regular. She's been with Can Do for many years, and it's great to have you here tonight, Stephanie. Warm welcome to Candy Harrington, author, journalist, and editor of Emerging Horizons. Welcome, Candy. Welcome, everyone, and really excited to get this started. So I'm going to pass this over to Candy. I'm going to disappear, and I'll be back a little bit later. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And so we have a few things that we hope everyone is going to learn today from our webinar. Number one, we're going to talk about the benefits of travel, and we're going to give you some tools and strategies to help you plan your getaways. And we're also going to be talking about managing MS on the go when you travel.
So I don't think, it's a surprise to many people, but benefits of travel are listed here. And the first one I like to really talk about is the quality of life. Just being able to enjoy life, enjoying the things you do. Instead of focusing on, and like we say with Can Do, things you can't do, let's focus on things you can do and enjoy those things. And by doing that, you're also going to help your mental health. You might get to learn about new cultures, new people, get to go to new countries and learn a whole new experience. You might be able to stay more involved with your community or your family by going to family reunions or visiting people. I think having a good traveling experience and being able to enjoy it is really going to make you feel more confident in yourself and trust yourself and that you can do these things. And for those of you who work a lot, it's a really good way to have a work-life balance. And just, it's fun. Traveling's fun. It can be fun. It can be hard, but we're going to help you make it more fun.
Hacking. Okay, so prior to being diagnosed with MS, I was already a planner, but now having MS, you really have to be a planner. So packing the ultimate travel mess. Make a list. If I don't write it down, I am not going to remember it. And never underestimate the time that you need to actually set that list aside and start actually putting it into motion and putting things into a suitcase. So things to take into consideration would be medications, personal hygiene items, clothes, entertainment and snacks, electronics, and anything else. So take your time. Sometimes I can literally spend 2 to 3 weeks packing, depending on the length of my stay, where I'm going, the weather, the events that are planning. Is it a work trip? Am I taking a suit? Is it hot out? Am I going to die in a suit, or do I need to wear something breathable? So all of these things are something to definitely take into consideration when you are packing. Thanks, Kate. And condense those vital items. So you would be amazingly surprised at how many of your favorite products that you consider essentials to travel with, they come in small versions, which make it really, really easy. The lighter, the better. Be really cognitive of, okay, can I condense this? Can I put it into something lighter? Can I opt in for, I love those little individual Ziploc baggies where you can label, okay, Monday morning, Monday night, Tuesday morning, Tuesday night. And there is a lot of anxiety when it comes to packing because we want to be comfortable. We want our stay to be as smooth as possible. We don't want to get to our destination and go, oh, I don't have what I need. That's not a good panic moment. So lessen the stress, lessen the anxiety, prep in advance, and it's going to make everything so much easier. Multiple options for one outfit that can be transferable. A little bit is going to go a long way if you're prepping in advance for that. And research. You wouldn't believe how many people underestimate this when they're actually looking at their final destination. So with multiple sclerosis, because our bodies change so frequently and can even change on a minute to hourly basis, we have to take all of these things into consideration. Is there a lot of walking? What is the weather going to be like? Is the location handicap accessible? And for some reason, maybe it's because I have a very visual mindset, I like to take pictures or obtain pictures of my destination just so I have a visual idea of what I'm going to be entering in once I get to that destination. And Candy, I think this was you for communicating with your destination. What tips can you give us?
Thank you. I'm hugely into effective communication. It's essential for a good trip. Ask about your accommodations. Ask what you need at your hotels. Call the hotel directly. And if somebody in the front desk cannot answer your questions, ask to speak to somebody in housekeeping, because these are the folks that are in and out of the rooms and they know what's in them. And of course, you want to confirm all of your bookings. As far as the airlines go, you want to request baggage assistance and airport assistance. And you can do this when you make your reservation. You can do it from the website. Most of the airlines have really good websites about the services that they offer. One thing I do want to talk to you about the airlines is the CRO. This is a complaints resolution official, and this is something that's mandated under the law. Now, U.S. airlines and foreign carriers that fly to and from the U.S. have to have a CRO. Now, this person is really important because they are specially trained to resolve access-related problems. And more importantly, this person knows the law where your rank and file airline employees may not. And the CRO has authority over everybody except the captain, and they even have authority over the third-party contractors. So always, always, always ask for that CRO when you run into a problem. And if an airline employee doesn't know what the CRO is or who they are, ask to speak to the supervisor, because they will absolutely know that. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about knowing your rights. And I know there are a lot of URLs here on this slide, so don't worry about writing them down, because again, you're going to all get copies of this. I feel it's essential to know your rights because you need to know what to expect, because when something goes wrong, you need to know when it's going wrong. And over on the left here, I'm going to be talking about laws in the US. We have the ADA and the Air Carrier Access Act. Now, the ADA, it applies to things like hotels and public places and public transportation, while the Air Carrier Access Act applies to air travel on all US airlines and on airlines to and from the US if they're foreign. So I encourage you to read the law so you know what to expect. The third link I have down there is the Disabled Air Travelers Bill of Rights, I could do a whole presentation on accessible air travel, but this is an article that I have written, and it basically lets you know what to expect when you travel on an airplane. It gives you your rights. More importantly, it lets you know what to do if something is going wrong. Now, in the middle there, I have some links to the TSA. The TSA is an agency. They are a government agency. They handle security at our airports. They are not subject to the ADA or the Air Carrier Access Act. However, they do have their own security guidelines, and they have them on your website. And I encourage you to read that so you know, again, what to expect. But the very best advice I can give you about going through security is don't do anything that you're physically unable to do, even if they ask you to do it. The second link down there is a really good link, TSA Cares. You need to call these people at least 72 hours in advance. They also have a web form that you can use if you prefer. But this is if you're taking something through security and you're not sure about it, like some solutions, some IV solutions, something on ice, medication that has to be refrigerated. These people will tell you exactly what to do. It's airport specific, and they can even arrange to have somebody meet you at the security and escort you through. And lastly, TSA PreCheck. This is a program that may be of interest to some slow walkers. It's basically a streamlined security process. You don't have to take off your coat. You don't have to take off your shoes. You have to pay $78. You have to go in person and fill out some forms and get fingerprinted, but it might be something that some people are interested in. Finally, over on the right, nobody likes to complain. I know. When you're on a trip, if something goes wrong, try to mitigate things, ask for compensation, but try to enjoy your vacation. When you get home, I do encourage you to file an official complaint, either an ADA complaint or an Air Carrier Access Act complaint. It won't help you personally, but it's a way to affect change and a way to make travel more accessible. I'd like to talk a little bit about accessible hotel rooms. And as the slide says, they come in all shapes and sizes. I'm talking about the US here, but even in the US, there isn't a standard accessible hotel room. All accessible hotel rooms do not have roll-in showers. They can have a tub shower combo or transfer type shower under the law. These are also considered accessible. And I will tell you that properties in the US with less than 50 rooms, the accessible rooms do not have to have a roll-in shower. So if you need a roll-in shower, A, you have to ask for it, and B, it's a good thing to look at the larger properties. And I will also tell you bed height. If bed height is an issue for you, you're going to have to call the hotel directly because there's all sorts of bed heights out there. It is not regulated under any law. And of course, again, this is for hotels in the US. When you go overseas, you're going to have to research that and find out what the standards are there. I do want to say one thing about the US, the airport shuttles. I often get this question. If there's an airport shuttle that a hotel offers for free, under the ADA in the US, they also have to offer equivalent accessible service. Now, they don't have to own the shuttle. They can share it with another hotel. They can have an accessible taxi come for you, or they can pay your taxi fare. But they do have to offer an equivalent service. So I do advise you to check with the hotel in advance when you make your arrangements. And now I think Brittany is going to talk about some travel with mobility aids.
Thanks, Candy. This can be a really, really stressful topic when you are planning, because with MS, there are days where I don't need anything. Other days I'm using my walking cane, and then sometimes I'm ambulatory depending on the heat intolerance, and we have an ongoing disagreement. So really finding mobility aids that are convertible. Maybe it's a folding cane. I love my folding cane for air flight travel because I can easily put it in my duffel bag, my backpack. Even opting for convertible rollers also that can be easily transported into a transport chair. two of my favorite companies out there, by Acre. They make the world's lightest rollator in the world. They're amazing, as well as Rolls Motion. Their rollator actually can be converted into a transport chair. So if you are traveling with a spouse or a loved one or a family member or a friend, and you have hit your point and, you know, from the waist down, things are going kind of funky, you can say, hey, can we convert it and roll me? So be really communicative also about the mobility aids that you do expect yourself to need ahead of time. So you can coordinate that with the airline, the train, the bus service, anybody, sky captains, anything, and always protect your mobility aid. I know that we spend sometimes hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on these mobility aids, that they do more likely than not, they do come with some sort of protective bag. So accessorize, you know, get those accessories going so you are protecting your investment, and don't be afraid to bring multiple things in preparation. If one day you're fine and you just need something basic like a walking cane or a rollator, maybe depending on the length of your stay, you might need something additional. So don't be afraid of that judgment of, well, am I bringing too much? You know your body, you know your body's limits. So it's better to be prepared.
And I also always tell people to don't surprise anybody. If you need accommodations because you use some kind of medical equipment or assistive device, be very clear about it and ask for them. I will say probably the best tip that I'm going to offer during this entire webinar is to always request an airport wheelchair, even if you don't use one at home, and request connection assistance. The reason is airports are large. You just want to conserve your energy. You want to enjoy your vacation, and you want to prevent fatigue. And I will say that when you have that airport wheelchair, don't let them take it away from you at the gate, because if there's a gate change, you're going to need a way to get to your new gate. And sometimes that can be at the other end of the terminal. So always keep that airport wheelchair. And I think Stephanie has some more tips for managing fatigue and heat.
Yeah, thank you. So Brittany mentioned heat and how it affects her. So a lot of us have heard that heat impacts MS and it makes things a little bit harder, might make you function a little differently. So when you're planning and you're making those lists, keep in mind the temperature of where you're going. Consider the season you're going to go. Are you going to a tropical island in the middle of their summer, or are you going to go there when the weather's a little cooler? That can help you plan, and that can help you have a more successful trip while you're there. Choose clothing that work well with the climate. We already said that it's good to choose an outfit that can do more than one thing. Pick layers. Layers are great because if you're cool, you can put them on, and then when you get hot, you can pull some layers off. Bring cooling tools. So some people have cooling vests, neck wraps, small personal fans. Emergency ice packs are a big one that I really recommend to people. Just a couple packs that snap and get cold. That might be an issue with flying, but if you're driving, they're really nice to have, because if you find yourself in a sudden situation where you need ice suddenly, it's easy to access. Stay hydrated, stay hydrated, stay hydrated. A lot of people will get nervous about having to urinate while they're on a plane, so they start to cut their liquids, but that can also pose new risks and new concerns. Nobody wants to end up with a UTI on their trip either. Adding ice to your drinks will help drop your core temperature, and consider some cold meals on the go. So sandwiches, cold salads, smoothies, fruit, those are all things that are going to help you stay cool when you're on the go. Fatigue. I know this is probably the biggest topic we hear about in MS usually. So there's this saying I've heard, and I know many of you here today probably heard me say this a million other times, but someone told me once, MS gives you $1 a day. How much are you going to budget for the fun stuff? So when you're thinking of, I have $1, that's how much energy you have. You have 100 pennies to spend on the activities you're going to do. So when Candy mentioned taking the wheelchair assist in the airport, that just might have saved you, depending on your body, 5 pennies, or it could have saved you 25 pennies. Those pennies will be handy later when you go on your trip and you're actually there and you want to go on a safari ride. And now you have those pennies to spend on the next day. Bring or rent equipment that can make your trip easier. Brittany mentioned having smaller and lightweight equipment is really helpful. In some places, you can rent equipment when you get there. So reaching out to companies before going can really help you plan for that. Communicating with those traveling with you. So communicating with them if you're starting to feel fatigued, not waiting until you can't go anymore. So you could take some of those breaks. Communicating maybe what your signs are of fatigue. Some people have different signs. Someone might have some drop foot and that's their sign, or somebody's speech might change and that's their sign they're getting fatigued. And if you tell the people you're traveling with, they can help you monitor that and they can say, hey, I noticed that your speech is changing a little. Should we take a break? So being aware of your fatigue is key. Stay organized. We've already talked about lists. Stay organized as much as you can and plan your days accordingly. Don't plan all the big activities in one day. Break it up. Have one big activity, have a relaxing activity, and then maybe a medium activity, get a nap in between, but plan your days. Managing MS while traveling with bowel and bladder concerns can be frustrating, to say the least. One of the things we always talk about in our programs is spot the pot. It's kind of a game. If you have kids with you, you can say whoever finds the potty first wins. So everybody looks for the bathroom signs. And it kind of just makes it entertaining and less feeling of like an awkward situation. So saying spot the pot and everybody works together to find it can really help you, because once you know where it is, it's a lot easier to get there in an urgent situation. Pack your incontinence supplies for long drives or plane rides. They might have limited bathrooms in some places, so it's great to have some incontinence supplies with you. Bring extra cathing supplies if you are catheterizing. Something could fall, you could drop one, you could expose one to something that you don't want touching you, so bring a couple extras. Call ahead to anywhere if you're going to have dinner or something like that, and find out where their bathroom is and ask to be seated near the bathroom. That way you can quickly get there if you need to. Then at the same time, you're saving some of those pennies because you don't have to walk across the entire restaurant to get to the bathroom. Try to stay as close as you can to your normal diet as possible. And I know that's so hard when we're traveling, but changing your diet a lot can also make it unpredictable about your bowel and bladder function. So getting as close as you can to your diet is great. And watching the alcohol is really important too, because that changes your frequency as well and your balance. Traveling with some gut support supplements, they can help you stay regular, but don't overdo it. So keeping your gut moving and keeping it flowing like normal is going to be important. So
definitely. Thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, I think this is a really, really tricky topic. Thanks, MS. But there's a lot of pressure, especially when you are maybe traveling with friends, maybe a new love interest, and you're being openly transparent. And that does require a lot of vulnerability and a lot of bravery. And sometimes it can be a little embarrassing and a little daunting, but I really hone in on the whole A Hot MS celebrate your mess slogan, because I think that it just takes the sting out of it. It takes the negative stigma and the embarrassment out of it. And I'm sorry, but you ain't cool unless you pee your pants, in the words of Billy Madison. So be openly transparent. It's okay to be vulnerable. We all are fighting, our own obstacles and our own challenges in different ways. So the more, just as Stephanie had mentioned as well, the more that we are transparent and open, the more that our support system and those around us are able to better assist us in being able to navigate this and have a good time, because we don't want to have to worry about this stuff.
So also we're going to talk about traveling with medications. So one of the interesting things that we talked about was how we're going to manage medications through different time zones. So it's really important to contact your doctor and ask, how do I take my dosage? When do I take my dosage? Because things are going to change when you travel through a different time zone. You might not be able to take your medication 8 hours after the last because you're sleeping now. So figuring that out is really important ahead of time. Travel insurance can be beneficial if there's issues and you lose medication, or you have a sudden flare-up of something and you need a new medication while you're on the go. So travel insurance can help with that. I highly, highly recommend having a document on you at all times when you're traveling that has the information, including your neurologist, current medications, comorbidities such as seizures or diabetes, emergency contact information. There are a lot of ways you can put this into your phone, actually, and you can put your emergency contact to show even once your phone just lights up. So putting this in your phone is usually the best option, and the most likely you're going to keep it with you. But if the phone thing's not kind of your jam, then just throw it on a piece of paper and keep it in your pocket. And the next thing is keep connected with the MS groups in that area. You can reach out and contact them and say, hey, where do you get this? Hey, where's the best doctor if I need something while I'm on the go?
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about our national parks because, well, I love our national parks. I've written many books about them, and they've really done a good job with access. And again, you're going to get these slides, but this is a link to an extensive article I wrote. It has a lot of general national park tips. It also tells you how to get an America the Beautiful access pack for free admission. I also talk about special driving passes for disabled visitors at certain parks. I give you information about advanced entrance reservations at our more popular national parks. And I have a lot of information about accessible tours, lodging, and attractions in the national park. And I even have accessible itinerary suggestions. It's a really good primer for a national park visit, an accessible national park visit. And moving on to the next slide, Glacier National Park. I love Glacier National Park. I love this trip because this is a trip you do not have to have a car to do. I get a lot of questions about, I want to travel, but I don't drive and I don't have a car and I don't want to take a group trip. Well, you can visit Glacier National Park on Amtrak's Empire Builder train. You know, it runs from Chicago to Spokane. It has connections out to Seattle and Portland. It takes about 30 hours from Chicago, and it's an overnight trip from Spokane. Now, the train itself is very accessible. It's got an onboard lift, large accessible lavatories. It has an accessible bedroom with a sink and a toilet, and they also have an accessible shower. Now, the train stops in both West Glacier and East Glacier, and the concessionaires have accessible shuttles to get you to your lodges there. Now, once you're all settled in, you can take a free shuttle, going to the Sun Road shuttle to see the park. You can see things like this boardwalk trail of the Cedars. It's absolutely beautiful. They also have a private accessible red bus tour, which I highly recommend. That there's a picture of that in the slide. It's a very accessible way to see a national park without a car, and I have complete details of how to do it in the article. And finally, I want to talk about a few road trip resources. Advanced planning is really essential for a road trip, you know, just like anything else. But there are a few things that people overlook when they're planning an accessible road trip. One is emergency road service. Now, it's essential for any road trip, but I will tell you that very few companies have accessible vehicles. The link up here, Mobility Roadside Assistance, does, and they're a club like the AAA, and I encourage you to look at them for your next road trip. The second thing that a lot of people overlook is adaptive vehicle repair. If you drive an adapted vehicle, you just can't take it to any old place. You need to know where you can get it serviced along your route. Now, the National Mobility Equipment Dealers Association has a directory on their website, and it lists all the dealers across the US. So you can go and you can look up who's on your route. You can write down their phone number, put it in your phone. So if something unforetold happens on your trip to your car, you have a resource right there at your fingertips. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Stephanie to wrap things up here.
So key takeaways. There are many benefits to travel. We talked about that. Planning is key. Plan, list, prepare. If you want to be like Brittany and take 2 weeks to pack, it's going to be a lot less stressful if you can take your time to do it. So plan. And no matter how far you want to go, there's an option for you. So we want to help you find a way to make it happen. and prepare for obstacles. And we're going to hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. Things can happen. So if you're prepared, it's just going to make your trip a lot easier.
Couldn't agree more, Steph. I think that there's so many things that having MS, we say, well, I can't do that anymore. And it's like, yes, we can. We just have to do it differently. And that is the thing, is we are kind of grieving. We are grieving a previous version of ourselves. So there is a way to figure it out. You just need to know where to move your chess pieces.
Absolutely. And I feel like almost doing these things can help you find that older version of yourself again.
Yes. Yes.
Well, thank you to all of our panelists. We got through a large amount of content in a short amount of time. I want to take just a second. As a reminder, we're going to ask you to complete a survey, and that will pop up on your screen at the conclusion of the webinar. But for now, we have lots of time to go through a few questions. Some of these were submitted prior to the webinar, and some of them have been submitted this evening. So we'll just go ahead and get right into those. And one of them that came through, excellent question. I'm going to pass this to Candy. The question is, how do I use the bathroom on an airplane if I'm wheelchair bound?
It's a question I get a lot. Very good question. The answer is, it depends on the airplane. In the US, again, the Air Carrier Access Act, wide body jets are supposed to have accessible lavatories. Now, an accessible lavatory on an airplane is not the same thing you're going to find on the ground. Usually it has enough room for an onboard wheelchair, which they're also supposed to carry on the plane, and it has some grab bars. Now, if you are on a wide body jet, you'll get in the onboard wheelchair. The flight attendants will help you. They'll push you to the lavatory, and then you're on your own. You can go in the lavatory in the onboard wheelchair, but they won't offer any other assistance. Now, the law is changing a little bit to require single aisle aircraft with more than 125 seats to also have these accessible lavatories. You're going to start to see these changes probably in 2026, but they won't be fully implemented until 2071. Yeah, 2071. So I do say, look to the newer wide body jets. The Boeing 787s are great. Airbus 320s, they have these flexi restrooms that are like twice the size of a regular restroom. A really, really good resource. You want to find out what kind of plane you're on, what kind of restrooms they do have, lavatories, seatguru.com. That's SEATGURU.com. It has all of the airline diagrams of all the planes specific to not only the airline, but the day you're going, the date you're going, the exact flight you're on. Now, it won't say, oh, here's an accessible lavatory, but you can look at the size. You can see there's a teeny lavatory over here, and maybe on the other side, there's a lavatory that's twice the size of it. But I also tell people, always, always, always ask the flight attendant to make sure that your onboard wheelchair is on board before you take off, because sometimes they do get offloaded for maintenance and stuff. And you don't want to get in the middle of your flight and find out you've got an accessible lavatory, but you don't have a way to get there. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Candy. Passing this one over to Brittany. How to deal with the judgment to get needed support when necessary, and saying no thanks when you don't feel like it's needed.
That's a tricky one, because while your needs are going to change, so does your inner apprehension of being transparent about those changes. And that can be a really, really tricky thing to explain to people, because while today you might not require much assistance, the next day you may, and explaining that can be daunting, and it can be really stressful, because it's like, well, no, please believe me. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, we have to be mindful that what works for us works for us. At the end of the day, the only person that we owe ourselves explanation is ourselves. And while that sounds kind of harsh, I think it takes more energy to be more hyper-focused on what other people are going to think, rather than what is better suited for you and your body. You're the one in this mess. You're the CEO of this mess. You're running this mess. You're walking in this mess. You're operating in this mess. So it's really, it can be also presented in an educational standpoint that if somebody is confused, well, yesterday you were fine, and well, how come today's a little bit different? Yes, while it's easy to get defensive and put that wall up and put that barrier up, it's also giving us an opportunity as those living with the disease to educate and say, well, you know, this is the situation. Or remember when we did this yesterday, that actually triggered me. Judgment, I get it. It's not fun. It is very, very overwhelming, but you have to put yourself first. You have to put your body first, and you have to put the disease first. So you do you, let everything else kind of figure itself out and filter through that. I hope that person that answered that or asked that question has a better mind on it now.
Thanks,
Tricky.
Brittany.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Brittany. I do want to address also a lot of questions coming in from the care partners perspective. So we got a question asking, they wrote, we're about to travel to Hawaii with our daughter who has MS. What should we be aware of as far as longer air travel? So I think all of you can kind of come with a different perspective to this question.
Yeah, I would keep in mind that in those longer air travels, you're still for a really long time. You don't move. And if you have any spasticity or muscle tightness, it's important to get up and move a little bit if you can, or at least move your legs under the seats, pump your ankles up and down, do the alphabet with your ankles if you can, moving your arms, but keeping that blood flowing and keeping those muscles from getting tight is really great. It's going to help make it easier when you get off the plane, actually.
I will say a good thing to think about for an extended long flight. Again, I'm in on the bathrooms. Know what your bathroom situation is going to be aboard the plane. Use the seat guru, and definitely and make sure that that onboard wheelchair is on your plane before you take off.
Communication too, you know, it's sort of like that when you have to go really, really bad and there's a line of 30 women. I am the first one to say, I have a disability. Is anyone opposed to me skipping the line? I've never had anyone say no to me. It's just, we have to get more comfortable with being transparent and being a little vulnerable.
And that kind of comes back to when I mentioned the MS gives you $1 a day. If you're going to stand in that line for 7 minutes, you just wasted 5 to 10 pennies just standing in line to use the bathroom. So having that confidence in yourself to be able to say something and move forward is going to make it so that you save those pennies, maybe to go out to a movie that night, or maybe you're gonna go to a play or something, because you might not be able to do it if you spend it all on boring things like standing in line to the bathroom or trying to walk through the entire airport. Absolutely.
These are the things that we don't often think about too, until it's too late and we're like, why do I feel exhausted?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Candy, we're getting a lot of questions about hotel rooms, accessible hotel rooms. So one great question is, one person asked, what kind of questions can you ask a resort to determine if they're truly accessible? And then somebody else asked, what happens if you check in and your room isn't actually accessible? So can you address those two questions?
Sure. You can ask them, just there's no law that says you can ask these questions or those questions. You can ask for whatever you need. If you need a roll-in shower, ask for a roll-in shower. If you need a bathtub, fine. If you need something on the first floor, ask if there's an accessible room on the first floor. Whatever your needs are, if you want to go swimming, ask if they have a lift in the swimming pool. And also ask if they've checked the batteries in the lift lately to make sure that it's in operating condition. As far as, and the second question was a really good question too. Basically, if you get to the hotel and they don't have an accessible room, but you reserved one. In the US, actually, it is required that they block an accessible room upon reservation. Now, blocking a room means that they say, a specific room for a specific person on a specific date. It's not the same as guaranteeing. Guaranteeing only really talks about the rate that you're paying. All accessible rooms are required to be blocked in the US. So when you're making your reservations, ask if they're going to block the room. Now, if they hem and haw about it or say no, you need to talk to the manager. If the manager just says, well, yeah, you know, we'll see if it should be available when you get here, that's not good enough, because you don't want to arrive late at night, tired, and not have your room available for you. I tell people, go to another hotel, give your money to somebody else, and come home and file an ADA complaint, because that is the only way the situation is going to change.
Thank you. Here's a great question. I think, again, all of you can talk to this one. What if I get a relapse or worsening symptoms while traveling? So you can do all this planning ahead and make all of these accommodations, but what happens if it's getting worse while you're there?
One thing I say is try and have a flexible schedule where you have things that you want to do, but maybe you can do this on that day. And if that doesn't work out, if you're just really tired, you can save it till the next day to do it. So try not to have a really tight schedule. I know sometimes you do have to schedule some things, but you know, try to have something that you can change if you need to.
And get refundable tickets to things, or flexible tickets to things that can be
insurance
changed.
too.
Yep, and that travel insurance is huge, because if you end up missing out on an event because you just can't handle that day, you're going to get your money back through your travel insurance too. I think that's really important. And like we said, having your a neurologist in that area, some contact information. So if things are kind of getting really scary or uncomfortable, you have someone to go to. And even sometimes just having someone check out things and make sure you're okay can make your anxiety better. And then that anxiety feeling better can allow you to relax and function a little bit better too.
I do have a question here about traveling with medication. So maybe we can go over some of those details too. How to pack medications, are there restrictions, etc.
One thing I would say, well, obviously I had talked about the TSA and getting them to escort you through with, like, if you have IV fluids or any unusual medications. The other thing I've had a lot of problems with are people that have talked to me about narcotics. If you take any narcotics, take them in the original bottle. I know it's easier to put them in the pill things, but you want to show them that you have the narcotics legally in case you go through customs and somebody has an issue with that. So that's one thing I would watch out for.
Thank you. And Stephanie, a couple of questions about the clothing, how to stay cool while at the beach and attending a summer outdoor wedding in semi-formal attire. Pretty specific.
Ooh, that's going to be me this Saturday coming up, and I'm kind of dreading the heat. The clothing, so considering clothing that's breathable, so wicking materials that will kind of it's like evaporative cooling, so when that evaporates off of you, it helps you cool. Wicking materials, breathable materials, finding where you might have options for shade or breaks if you know you're going to need to cool off. Contacting the people at the venue maybe ahead of time and say, you know, I'm going to need somewhere to cool off periodically. Can I have access to a small space where I can relax? And even better, if there's like a couch or a lounge or something for you to lay down, naps. And even if they're not naps, even if you're just laying down, that's going to help you conserve a little bit of energy. So I think breathable clothing, and we talked about clothing that you can layer and remove if you need to. That's huge. Those cooling devices, hats, absolutely.
Yep. Even for formal events, I have got a collection of parasols. They're like fancy umbrellas. And they look really, really good with a cocktail dress. If I'm outside and I'm in the sun, everyone thinks I'm just extra. I'm like, no, I'm melting. So, you know, hats, accessories. There's also a company that is unfortunately no longer, but what it was a a wrap or a scarf that you could actually wet and it would stay cool for hours. I'm sure there are other products on the market out there now like that. But again, looks like a wrap, but keeping me cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we said before, cold drinks, cold food, smoothies, anything like that. If you have access to anything, cold fruit at weddings and things like that,
Yeah.
that's going to help you also.
And not too many people know about this too, but if you ever have a cold glass of water in front of you, if you are resting your inner wrists on that glass, your pulse points, that will actually be a really, really good way of cooling yourself down a little bit quicker as well.
Excellent. Candy, specifically for you, can you talk about cruise lines? Are there cruise lines that are wheelchair or scooter friendly?
Yeah, actually cruises, we didn't really talk about cruises too much or at all. They are, most of the major cruise lines, I would say, are good. Choose a ship, a large ship that's probably built within the last 3 years. They have really nice accessible cabins with roll-in showers. Choose your itinerary wisely, though. You want to avoid tender ports. Tender ports are where the ship doesn't actually come into the pier. It anchors offshore and you have little boats that take you to and from. Sometimes the tenders are not wheelchair accessible. If you have a wheelchair or a scooter, you won't be able to get on board or on shore. I also say choose your own, do your own shore excursions. The cruise lines do have shore excursions, accessible shore excursions that they offer, but unfortunately we're seeing by the time they get around to doing them, they're all sold out. So I do tell people to go look at Cruise Critic. It's CRUISECRITIC.com. They have an excellent board on disabled cruising. They've been around for about 30 years, and you can go on there and ask about shore excursions, and you'll have people that tell you the local suppliers, and then you can book directly with them. I will say, I get a lot of questions about river cruises in Europe. Not really the best accessible choice. Some cruise lines do offer access on their ships, on their river cruises, but the problem is with the docking, because you don't, it's very limited. Sometimes they have to do what I call double parking, where there's a ship is, next to the ship, and you can go like 3 ships deep. So in order to get off, you're going to have to go from one ship to the other ship upstairs down this. And so that's not really feasible. And they don't really know what their situation is until they dock. So I will say, if you're looking at a river cruise in Europe, I will say steer clear of Viking. They just really don't want to do anything about access. I've had more horror stories about them than you can even imagine. But if you want to do a river cruise in the US, there are some companies that do offer great accessible river cruises too.
Sounds great. Let's see here. Brittany, I had a question. Actually, I think Stephanie was going to address this about how do folks find assistance once arriving at their destination? Maybe they didn't plan ahead, or maybe something has come up, something's changed. So how would you go about finding assistance once you've arrived?
Hopefully you did plan a little bit, but ideally, if you have a point of contact before you go, at least, and I would say the local MS groups would be a great resource. You can contact someone through a local MS group and see what references they have in the area, who maybe the neurologist is, or who does wheelchair repair in the area in case you need to repair a wheelchair. You ideally, it's all planned ahead and all all of this, but things do come up and things happen. So it is going to be a little research, and this is a great time to lean on your support partners. This is a time when maybe you're not feeling good, things aren't going right, and you're needing some assistance, and it's a great time to ask, hey, can you help me research this? Usually people are really happy to help you research things. It's like the easiest thing to do to help people. So having people in your group that can help you out is nice also.
Nice. Anybody have something else to add to that or moving on? All right. Can anybody answer, are airlines required to have an onboard wheelchair or do you have to request it?
If they have an accessible lavatory, the wide body jets, they are required. Some will have an onboard wheelchair, even if they don't, but they're not required.
And getting a little bit into some of the financial aspects of this, does anybody have any affordable travel tips to offer or tips for traveling on a budget with MS?
That's a good one.
That's
I
a
wanna know how to
hard
travel on a
one.
budget.
I know, I'm like,
Okay, I have one.
Curveball.
save, I mean, save, obviously. So you're just a little broke forever as opposed to really broke all at once.
Yeah, if you take a road trip, go to the grocery stores and plan picnic lunches. A lot of the rest stops are accessible and restaurants are getting expensive these days. So that's a way you can cut down and maybe spend something more on something else.
Yeah, we had to do that in Iceland just because the expense of eating there was crazy. So every
I
day for
know.
lunch, we ate like convenience store stuff, peanut butter and jellies, and we were just like, make it till dinner time. Also, if you can eat at your hotels, getting hotels that have meals included, there's two great things about that. One, your food's included, and two, you don't have to try and set up another schedule to go to a restaurant, travel there, get there to use all this energy. So eating at your hotels can be helpful. A lot of hotels have restaurants in them too to make that a little bit easier. And I think
I've even door dashed. I've Instacarted at hotels. I've door dashed at hotel. I've done it at hospitals.
Mhm.
Because then you can just go order a grocery list. If there's a fridge in there, then you just order what you need and you're good to go.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
And finding free things to do. Like there's a lot of free things to do in many places. That might be outdoors activities, that's sightseeing, that's hiking. I know Candy shared us how to get your free national parks pass. Like those are great ways to save money as well.
I saw somebody said in the chat also to travel off season, which would help too with the crowds. So that would help with financing it and also navigating crowded situations too. So great
Yeah.
suggestions.
A lot of museums have free days too. So look at the museums for their free days.
And Candy, I had one more question pop up about the CRO. Where did that one go? Sorry. It was, can you speak to a CRO even after you leave the airport? And somebody asked, what is the CRO again? So can you share a little bit more details about that?
Sure. A U.S. airlines and airlines that travel to and from the U.S., the complaints resolution officer, this is a person that's specifically trained to solve access related problems. In response to the question of can you talk to the CRO afterwards, generally the CRO is to solve a problem that you have immediately. Now, if you have a problem like they damaged your wheelchair and they're not fixing it, absolutely talk to the CRO after. But if it's like a problem I wasn't accommodated on the airplane like I should have been, no, that's when you file an air carrier access complaint. You have to get beyond that. So the CRO is somebody when you have a problem now.
Excellent. And one last question. I think we have time for another question. And again, Candy, this one was directed to you. Travel insurance often doesn't cover pre-existing conditions of 60 days or earlier. Any travel insurance specific for people with disabilities?
I don't know of anyone that's specific for disabilities. I am going to defer to the experts, which would be a travel agent. They know the latest about the travel insurance. I have several friends that are travel agents, and there are, you can get travel policies that do cover pre-existing conditions, but you have to buy them within a certain amount of time of when you make your booking.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think maybe we have time for one more question. Let's see, where did that one go? Actually, I've lost it. So I think we are wrapping up the webinar. And I just want to thank our panel again for being here and all of the viewers for being here. Just want to remind you to stay connected with us. The webinar's over, but we hope you'll stay connected. Follow us on social media for the latest programs, resources, and MS News. You can also register for our monthly e-news series by visiting candoms.org. Again, that's cando-ms.org. The next webinar Wednesday is July 10th. That'll be here sooner than we know it. Same place, same time. That's the second Wednesday of the month. It's July 10th, and the topic is MS Incontinence, Regaining Control. Again, I'd like to thank our generous sponsors for supporting this year's webinar series. Thank you very much. And that concludes this webinar Wednesday. Thank you all for joining us.